What is the most valuable piece of webinar advice like ever? Well, hello and welcome. My name is Roger Corville, and we're glad you're with us for another episode of V2's Thought Leader Conversations series. And the question on the table, at least the one we get kicked off with today, is what is the most valuable piece of webinar advice like ever? And that question comes from today's guest. I don't even know how many years ago it was that we met, but you know that here at Virtual Venues, we host a number of different platforms and we get really specific about use cases. And my guest and I met when she was at GoTo many years ago. And I don't know how many webinars we've done together. It's a lot. It's like probably countless. But that said, I would love for you to give me join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Erica Maki, Content Marketing Manager for Webinars, and I'll let her disclose her own space. But welcome, Erica. So good to see you again.
Thank you, Roger. Yes, it has been. I started thinking back. I think it's been over a decade, 10 years.
I think it has.
I learned from you. So this is so exciting to be on the show with you today.
I was afraid you would say that. Since this was your question, what is the most valuable piece of webinar advice ever?
This is the question that I've gotten most often over the last 10 years. And my most valuable advice came from you when I think I was quite jittery, not really knowing what I was doing. And you said simply, breathe. So I have taken that advice with me for 10 years and thousands of webinars, and I don't even know how many attendees, many of those together with you, helping people run better webinars, more engaging webinars and more impactful webinars. But yes, if you're not breathing, you're not confident and comfortable, and you haven't prepared, then things will tend to go awry. But and that happens. It's what you do with it when that happens. That is also another key factor. But that's my advice. It's simple. I have more advice, but the breathe advice has stuck with me for 10 years and it hasn't failed me. So,
well, you heard it here, folks. Erica says breathe, and that's in fact what I think it's useful to do. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things, and one of those reasons I so loved working with you is that we just got to this place where it's like, hey, let's just be real. Let's just be real with people, because we've seen enough production out of Hollywood to know that connecting with people is a useful thing. You have seen a lot of webinar attendees over time. What do you think they want? If we're putting ourselves in the shoes of somebody showing up to some event that promised them how to launch widgets on Tuesday or whatever they've shown up for, what do they think they want? And I don't know if that's a loaded question, but
yeah, I mean, there's one thing that they want. People aren't going to spend their valuable time and attend your webinar if they don't see a clear value for themselves, a clear pain that you're solving, something that you're helping them learn to make their lives easier, better, make them more successful at what they do. And you and I, we're lucky because we get to talk about what we love doing, and that's helping people run webinars. For 10 plus years there, working at GoToWebinar from the time it was in Citrix and rolled into LogMeIn, and now spun off smartly into GoTo. So it was a great place to be helping people and for that value to be so clear. But as someone who runs webinars and gives advice to people who runs webinars, in some aspects, giving webinars about webinars was easy. What happens, and I got this question all the time when you're giving webinars, your target audience is your C-suite, your executives, and you don't have as much freedom to be creative and have fun like we did, literally connecting with people, and how you can kind of translate that into any industry, I think is something that was a big challenge for our audience and that we helped them overcome.
Just out of curiosity, when you've seen that done wrong, I'm going to flip that question like upside down. I'm just curious, right? You just got done saying, offer a really clear path to value. When people don't do that, what's going wrong? I mean, presumably everybody thinks they're doing a webinar because they've got something to say that's of value. When they're when they're not hitting on all cylinders, what's going wrong? What do you see people doing?
That's true. They think they're offering something of value, but that's where like someone in our role where we have to push back. You know, you might be dealing with product teams that want to talk about their features and they want to talk about something they're so excited about, but they haven't made it clear why it's of value to the target audience, to the attendee. And if I don't see that up front, I pump the brakes and like we have to flip this around. We have to make it clear why it's going to be valuable for the attendee, for the target audience. So you can see that going wrong right away. You can see, you know, page-long stories of landing pages where we just want to talk and we want you to hear us talk. And I'm not looking at product marketing teams, but sometimes they're to blame here. You have to be able to push back and put yourself in the shoes of the customer, of the audience, the target audience, and what is going to clearly short, sweet, what's going to make it clear that it's of value and something they want to attend. If you don't do that, you'll start to see registration numbers drop, attendance numbers drop, and that's where the whole chain of events happens, where you'll get poor performance.
Are you seeing registration numbers drop? I mean, are you seeing,
Yeah.
given how long you've been doing this, what's that? You know, is it like invite? Where are people losing in the funnel? And I'm going to kind of use that in kind of air quotes, right? Is it invitation to registration? Is it registration to attendance? Is it where's that breaking down?
So this is interesting. I attended a webinar last year, about a year ago, 2022 predictions, given by Outreach, who I now work for, and they had me sitting on the edge of the seat. Our Mary Shea, who's our chief evangelist here at Outreach, said one of the predictions is the webinar dead, and I was like, no, no, it's not dead. And then she calmed me down and she said, it's not dead, but marketers are going to have to be more creative in how they run webinars, which is something you've always honed into, Roger. So hopefully the audience has been listening to you.
Preach it,
But
sister.
yeah, I was like, no, no, don't let the webinar be dead. So you know, and I will say that over the last 10 months, in running the webinars here, and I work for Outreach, which is a sales engagement platform that helps sales reps be more productive.
Outreach.io. Just
Outreach.io,
let's be
correct.
clear. Let's let people help people find you if need be.
Yes.
So keep going.
So helping, yeah, sales reps create and close more pipeline. So we had a webinar program before, but we just didn't have all of the pieces in place. And over the last, 10 months, we've over doubled our registration and attendance numbers from prior years. So no, the webinar is not dead. You can do it. You just need to have all of the right pieces in one place. It's not just one magic component. So it's a great way to still reach your audience, drive impactful leads for new logo and customer growth, and connect. Put that human element between you, your brand, your thought leaders, and your target audience.
Call me crazy, but I think people and value is just worth pounding the table on, right? I mean, I don't care if it's a webinar. I don't care if there's 30 people there or 300 people there. People connecting with people makes things happen, right? And until you connect with people, they don't care what you say, particularly if, anyway, I'll be quiet. So in your roles plural over the year, or let me clarify. You've had like, you were at GoTo for a long time, but there were a number of times when things shifted where like it was more focused on like lead generation as opposed to lead maturation, or sometimes like, customer experience and education. And I'm just curious if there's any one of those that, I don't know, most made your heart sing when you think about places that webinars worked great for you or needed some help. And I'm not just talking about your experience at GoTo, but more broadly, where do people, what's one of the more underutilized places that webinars have been used as you've seen?
So I think the most underutilized place is in customer engagement. and your prospects are your future customers. So there's overlap there, and I feel like that value and that sweet spot has really been a miss. And when you can hit that sweet spot, you're going to light up all the webinar numbers. Your sales team's going to love you. I'll tell you that. As long as you're doing it in a way that adds value. So where I've found kind of a niche place for myself is in that spot right there. Like, I love thought leadership, but if you're not tying into an actionable way that the target audience can improve and be more impactful in their own jobs every webinar, then you're missing that. So there are ways to do that, and when you hit that and you connect with your audience, you're engaging with them. We can talk about that topic too, probably for 8 or 10 hours, right, Roger? But
Just a few.
but that's where the sweet spot is, and that's probably the most overlooked area. Like, you have to be passionate about webinars. I think that's another thing where I see people miss. There's someone in a webinar role who doesn't who might have 10 other roles they're trying to do, and they don't have the luxury of really focusing and driving the impact that they need to do it to
Here's
do
a
it right.
sales analogy I just thought of. I don't even know if I've ever even thought of this before, but to me, one of the differences, if you think about the difference between telemarketing, which is all about numbers and I'm just dialing and I don't care how many times I get hung up on, you just keep pumping out numbers, right? It's entirely impersonal, as opposed to selling in its best sense is personal and conversational and right. To me, those are night and day difference. And I think that's maybe an analogy for a lot of webinar challenges. It might not be quite as obvious, but there's a lot of talking at people instead of talking with people.
Mhm.
And speaking of sales, since you're in that space now, do you think you use the term that salespeople love? Do you think there's a disconnect between marketing and sales? How do we do webinars that salespeople love?
$1 million question. Yeah, so I've been in places in my roles where we've had a really robust top of funnel thought leadership, getting these leads and feeding them down to the sales team, but we might not have done a really good job of nurturing those throughout the cycle. So in that case, those leads might not be leads salespeople love, because they're here to learn tips from an FBI agent, not to look at your product, or whatever it was. But when you hit that sweet spot, you get high quality leads, and your sales team, can follow up with those. It has been a challenge. There's always, I don't know. It's the $1 million question. And it's probably a super popular webinar topic, the connection between getting your sales and marketing teams to work together. But it is really about enabling your sales team with the information they need, so they can see how webinars have performed. They can see the dollar value in webinars if you want to share that with them and go like, hey, these leads, that we've brought you this many leads and they've converted like this over the years. Also having a really robust sales enablement team where you can hand off the webinar information at outreach. Of course, we use outreach and we have a webinar snippet. So we put everything right there for salespeople, everything that they need to take the webinar, share that value with their customers or their prospects, and then follow up with them too in an automated sort of way, of course. But that's been really key, and kind of an up level in my marketing game in the last year is definitely using that type of additional enablement for sales.
Is that something you can go a little deeper on? Let me tell you what I just heard that I think could be really interesting. You do webinars, and some part of that data gets to the sales team, right? And we all know that at the top level, that could be a name and an email address. Are you taking it further than that in terms of what data gets dropped into the CRM, or how that plays itself out? And if, to be fair, since you and I are just having a conversation, and if that's not a place you're at liberty to go, you don't have to feel like you need to.
So yeah, I'm not sure about that one. To go much deeper on that as far
Totally
as
fair.
the workings on our side, but you want to give your sales reps as much information as you can. And yeah, I'll say like I've been looking at platforms, different platforms that offer more of a, being able to port all of that valuable information on the engagement, et cetera, during the session over to your sales rep. So afterwards they can see exactly what people did in session other than attended, registered, did not attend, which have been our kind of metrics for a while now, as you know. But that's definitely a place of improvement.
My friends, that right there is a win. And I say that because as a guy that had his own company, started multiple companies, I've been on the receiving end of emails and phone calls from people going, "Hey, it looks like you attended our webinar last week," meaning they didn't get the registered but didn't attend data, right? And I always feel like that one piece of data right there could make that sound a lot more personal. And I've seen clients do it, but it's the minority, which is what is the data that's collected along the way, right? Because one of the things that a webinar uniquely does relative to somebody downloading a white paper or something is you've got a life cycle of data: registered, attended, or registered, did not attend. If they attended, did they vote in a poll, and how did they vote? Or did they ask a question? Right? It might be kind of interesting if I followed up and go, "Hey, Erica, looks like you asked a question about how to launch widgets on Tuesday during last week's webinar. Did you get your question answered?" That's a whole different kind of an input or, approach.
For sure.
And all of that's possible. It's just not done very often. Just out of curiosity, broadly speaking, this might be just like overall webinar industry kind of perspective since you've been doing this so long. What are you seeing right now? Trends or opportunities or problems?
So I think this is something I might have touched on with you too. And it could be your target audience. Sales professionals are busy people, but I think this is a wider trend, is that registration rates are going down. You're just not getting as many people to attend live. They know they can watch the recording when they're on their treadmill in the morning or the weekend or whatever, but you want to be able to get them to your event live, to engage with them, to connect with them. It's so valuable, and I definitely want to talk about engagement too before we go. But I feel like that's a trend. I have been really looking at some new platforms like Goldcast, who when you register, you automatically get that automatic calendar placeholder. You're not relying on someone to get their confirmation email and click and download and add their calendar placeholder. I think to me is gold. Like you can possibly increase your attendance rates by 10 to 12%. Imagine that type of impact when you are engaging the right way throughout the session to lead up to that CTA poll or that question that you're ultimately leading towards in your webinar.
One of the favorite things that you've often said that I love, I mean, honestly, particularly since you and I have both been a student of engagement and attention for so long, what you said earlier, but not just being clear about what the value is, but where to be clear, which is like right up front, right? I don't know about you, but just for me, that hello and welcome to today's webinar. And now we're going to talk about ourselves before we bring our, I mean, I understand why that's done, but a lot of it to me is just legacy when people didn't know what webinars were when I started in this space 23 years ago, as opposed to going, wait a minute, if my audience is Gen X and millennial, I don't need to tell them how to vote in a poll. Right. Just out of curiosity.
I got to tag on there. That is the biggest missed opportunity once you get people to a webinar, is to sit there and say, well, now we'll wait 1 minute in awkward silence and waste your time while we let people join on the webinar. Don't do that. Yeah, we like that goes along with the whole engagement conversation, but that is the worst way to start a webinar.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we do for almost all of our clients sadly, the ones we don't do it for are the ones who don't want to do it, is to start with some music or or something that just is different, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a
Right.
television production, just to do something a little different. Um, you mentioned wanting to talk about engagement and connection. What do you have some favorite tips, plural, particularly about how to do that at scale? Right? I mean, I think a lot of people know how to talk on the telephone or have a virtual meeting, but when you want to connect with more people than is the typical meeting, do you have some favorite tactics?
Yeah, and this is interesting because I just attended a webinar kind of like what I used to run, but it was talking about how to engage in the session. So of course they wanted to tout like all of their bells and whistles in session. And you look at in-session chat and Q&A and polls and hand raising and all of the engagement tools that, sometimes people are afraid to start using, they should be using. Um, but to me, like the big picture tip to that was like, and someone asked, what's your poll response in session? I only see it at 30%. And I'm thinking, I bet I know what happened here, because we go back a little way in the in the webinar world. You can't launch a poll 25 minutes in when you've done nothing to engage the audience before that.
They're working
So
on the next report for the next meeting by that point, right?
exactly. Yeah.
If they
So
don't
you've
think
lost that
if they think they're
opportunity.
invisible, you're lucky they're there at all, I think.
Mhm. So that's where like my best tip comes in, and something that we've had so much fun doing, and you can just feel the electricity in that virtual audience. Like you can connect with virtual audiences if you're doing it right and you're engaging from before to after, all the way through and after, not just like when you want to ask them a question and you're not throwing bells and whistles at them to distract them and have them play Pac-Man or whatever it is you want to do. Maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe that could be used sparingly. However, the early start, like we've done so many times, Roger, we called it pregame or, tailgating, webinar tailgating, whatever it is, you'd be so surprised, you wouldn't be, how many people join a few minutes early. And
Mhm.
why would you waste that time when you could be connecting with that audience? They're probably your most engaged audience. That's my bet.
Right.
Have some fun, yeah, you can ask where they're joining from. That's been done, but you can have, we did a March Madness webinar a few years ago where you had the basketball clock, and it was the March Madness of webinars, and we had like a very lively ask us anything session, where the audience stayed on and asked questions throughout the whole webinar. So if you're starting early and you're setting the tone for engagement early with connecting, hey, how's it going? Let me grab some water, or how about those Niners, whatever it might be, you can connect with the audience, have your official start at the top of the hour. I also kind of started doing that because some people don't like when you do chit chat after the official start. So do it before.
Right.
Connect with the people who are not, 100% all business there for the content, but give those people what they want too. So be ready to go. Uh, I always like to run one poll earlier on in the webinar, and not just for funsies. The poll that I'm running is intentional. I'm thinking about the topic and setting up the problem and the solution that I might talk about. So if I run a poll and I get the answers to the webinar or the poll question, and people are much more interested in, say, webinar engagement rather than driving attendance, then I would spend more of my time talking about that. And then you can refer back to that poll too, or use it at, if you've got 1,000 people in a webinar session, you can use those poll responses to speak to throughout or however many people you have. You
Right.
can use those poll responses to speak back to that live session engagement throughout the session, making it more of a like connected experience for that virtual audience. And then, you can throw in things, and I might have learned this from you too. I know we both do it a lot, is you're not just using official poll, you're saying, I see a question come in from Roger. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. Let me throw it out to the audience, and then look at the responses you get back from the experts in the audience that you can learn from as well. And that the time, the topic and the Q&A time, or whenever you decide to do that, can be varied, but there are so many different ways to engage and connect and offer value to a live audience that you should be pulling all of those levers and almost like, it almost like a musician, Roger. You don't have your you do have your keyboard in the background, so I'll use that reference.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, you just hit on one of the near and dear topics, which is why I'm pointing and wiggling, which is using a poll or frankly any tool on purpose. And there's value to you as the presenter or facilitator or producer, but it's also something that's you make relevant to the audience, meaning it becomes clear to them why you asked that question, is to me a big chunk of connectedness, right? We're communicating, and how we do that at scale, well, we're using a poll, because even in an in-person audience saying, hey, show of hands for all the people, blah, blah. Do you know if 600 versus 400 hands went up if there was 1,000 people in the room? I've spoken to more than 1,500 people. No, the answer is no. You probably can't even see the back of the room because of the lights in your eyes. So the power of doing that online isn't, do they reach up and push a button? The question is that a meaningful part of dialogue, albeit a dialogue in a little different context? And whether that's the poll, or like you say, seeing that Erica just made a comment and not just thinking about it as questions. To me, that's a mistake that all the platforms make, right? They always say, this is the questions box. No, it's questions and comments. Erica said, and if I'm the voice of Erica and Erica just typed in something that makes a lot of sense and I turn around and share that to the audience, not only did we just make Erica a rock star, everybody's looking around the room looking and going, whoa, this is more than just Roger as a sage on the stage. And Erica's voice just weighed in and made things better than if I was just doing all the presenting myself. And to me, that's just a missed opportunity, all of which gets back to just personal, using your tools to make that personal connection.
And I'll say too, like we've run one of our most popular topics when we're talking about webinars is how do you keep attention in a webinar? And it's not just one magic ingredient. It's doing all of the things intentionally, having two speakers for a change in voice, or like you'll do a lot in your webinars is very brave, like actually unmute someone to ask a verbal question that's going to get my attention back on the screen, like, hey, who's this, I was in a webinar today where Goldcast webinar week, where they brought someone live on from the audience to ask a video question, which was like very engaging. I mean, it gave the audience a laugh. The person who came on had accidentally a potato filter on their face, so it was like, and it was funny because people are like, "What do you do if you aren't you worried someone's going to come on camera and do something?" And I just thought back to our days where like, yeah, we took that risk, and most often people will be fine, and you can just be ready to turn them off if they're not.
I'm sure
But
you, like I,
it's the
have
human aspect.
had the follow-up question 100 times, which is, oh, but what if someone comes on and starts asking you questions about your competitor or something, right? Just out of curiosity, do you have a way that you answered that question? I
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
I haven't done that, in my webinars, Roger. It's there. I've seen you do it. I have not done it, and but yeah, you should be prepared, I guess, for that.
Well, to be fair, Erica's context for doing webinars and mine have been different. That's why our parallel paths intersected so many times. Um, Personally, I always just take people back to, what would you do in person? Well, if I was in person in front of an audience and somebody stood up and started talking about how my platform has a bug, or they started talking about one of the competitors, what would you do? Well, you got to be able to think on your feet and respond appropriately. Well, how is this any different? And oh, by the way, here we have the mute button. So if it's really, if they really said something inappropriate, you just shut them off. Just my humble opinion. But you've got to be that director of experience that kind of guides people, guides things, and keeps it moving. Just out of curiosity, what's been the most fun part of your career? Is there a way to characterize that? I mean, I know you love what you do, but just, is there any one piece of that has been stand out for you?
Let's see. Well, my motto is kind of like webinar day is the best day. It's the energy of like when you're actually connecting with an audience. I hope you all agree with me if you're watching this. If you're not, then you can get to there. You can get to that point. When you are doing things right, you're learning. You're always going to be improving. That is one thing that never stops, even in 10 years, Roger. We know that, or 20,
Right.
whatever the case may be. Uh, when you hit that sweet spot and you feel that energy from early start to staying late for Q&A because you're offering value and you don't see a drop off in attendees and the things are going well, that's a webinar. You get a webinar high, and like that's a sweet spot. I've had a couple of, I mean, I loved my time at GoTo. Love the company.
Yeah.
Love
Lots of
the
great people,
product.
great platform.
Yes, absolutely. And helping people run better webinars was the highlight of my career. Love my time with go to webinar especially. But I stepped up to a new challenge, man. I had to walk my own walk and take my own advice this year. It's a whole different ball game when you're everything outreach does is pretty next level. There it's fast, it moves fast. We've got a different target audience. You're targeting executives and sales leaders, and that's a little different than in the past. So I've had to learn and find where that sweet spot is. Um, I've pushed, I've tried to add more product, tips, actionable tips, because people like that. It's not all about that high level thought leadership. It's a little bit of a perfect mix in there, and we've had some really, it's been fun to see the results. So two
So,
highlights, because I feel like I'm in a new, kind of in a second leg of my
no,
career right now.
that's awesome that you're in a different place. Right? I mean, people expect emissaries of a vendor to say things nice about the vendor, right? If you work at Zoom or GoTo or On24, I don't care where you work, they expect, right? Which is part of why they put trust in outside voices who come in and validate something, right? That's quite fortunately how, where I've had the good fortune of being able to come in and work alongside GoTo and Adobe Connect and a bunch of different vendors and hopefully stay in that. Well, not hopefully. I stay in that independent analyst space, and of course, at V2, we host a half a dozen different platforms as well. But you just brought up something interesting, and I'm going to combine two things. One, in passing, you mentioned like staying late for Q&A and people actually staying on. People called us
Hmm.
crazy when we wanted to try that,
Yep.
didn't they? They still call us crazy, but also for people who want tactics. What if we wrapped up our time together today, beginning with the what people would stay late for Q&A? Um, Starting with that as a tactic, what if we just kind of close out our time here together? Just talking tactics. Tell me about that tactic. Stay late for Q&A. How do you do that?
Well, you schedule your webinar, start time, finish time. However, and again, you have to respect people's time. So you want to be able to get your content in the planned time frame. Definitely, that's a no fail. So you do that. You can set the expectation at the beginning. Hey, I'll stay late for Q&A. If you have Q&A, we have some time set aside in our planned time. Yes, we've got that too. But we've found so often that when you have an engaged audience who's willing to invest over an hour of their time, where else are you going to get that? Like, how valuable is that to you? And
Right.
you can run those webinar reports and see, oh, 130 people stayed on for that 10-minute demo that, Erica gave on the fly in the post webinar session because someone wanted to see how exactly you do that to connect better with your audience or whatever it
Right.
was. Can you pull that list and mark those 100 people as hot leads? Hey, sales team, you might want to follow up with these people. They just stayed on the webinar for 75 minutes and they were engaged.
Right.
So, like, those things are so valuable, and they're overlooked. It's like we have to stop. And more I hear people say, what's the sweet spot for webinar times? Oh, we find like it's 30 minutes. Like, no, I'm going to push back on that. I don't know if you'd agree, Roger, but as long as you're offering value and your promotional copy offered value to them, and you're following through with that promise, then like I can say that I've never seen a drop at 30 minutes. It's just not it's not going to happen unless you have people monologuing and reading or reading scripts, not engaging until the last second when they want to run a poll and no one's going to respond because they're multitasking at that point. Like
Right.
so don't throw away those opportunities. That's
Yeah. I mean, you've got to deliver what you've promised. Right. There's still a myth in the broader industry that that webinars are salesy. And so if you're promising, say, thought leadership or customer education, get into it and do exactly what you said. Now you might start by saying, hey, we're going to stick around late for Q&A, right? We're going to have all the content done in the hour, just like we promised. And for those of you who want to hang on, we'll just talk about anything. And you and I have seen some crazy results. Sometimes we've had people on. I remember one time you were chatting with me going, okay, we got to shut it down because they were on for a whole another hour.
yes.
And we just kept on going. Another tactic. How do we improve response rates to end of or post event surveys?
So part of this, part of that pain point, I kind of worked around in the last, I don't know, it's probably been 5 years now, but yeah, drop off rates for surveys, like you might get, I don't even know if you're lucky enough to get 40% of the people filling out a post webinar survey.
Yeah.
So I moved, when you earn the right to engage your attendees, let's say throughout the webinar, and then I moved our kind of like our call to action poll, or what we call hot lead poll, into the live session. So you're more likely to get someone to respond to your live poll than you will the post session survey. You've lost them once they've exited, I think. I just I would like to know better ways to get people to fill out the survey, but until then, I have pulled my hot lead or call to action poll in the live session, and I'll ask people right then, do you want to talk with one of our experts who can help you, show you ways to help your sales team's productivity? And yes or no thanks, I'm fine right now. But hey, if you get 100 people who say, yeah, I do want to talk to someone, you're going to get those leads to your sales team like right away,
I'm going to
and
just
mark
put an
them as hot
exclamation
leads
point
and
on
give
that.
your sales team.
I just want to make sure that if you're listening to this right now, you just heard what Erica said, right? We've all probably tried the dangle the carrot. You don't get the copy of the PowerPoint slides or the white paper or the free trip to Aruba or whatever, unless you fill out the post events. We've all tried that, but that's brilliant. Bring that call to action into the point where you're having trusted dialogue instead of hoping that they do that on their way out the door when their brain is on the way out the door.
Yep.
No, that's awesome.
That's probably been I will say that's been the most impactful thing I've done with webinars in my time kind of iterating and learning.
Are there any back end tools that you think are underutilized? Meaning they imply a tactic like, hey, when you log into GoTo or Zoom or something like that, there's this feature. Don't miss that feature. And I know I'm totally putting you on the spot here. I'm just thinking about.
One thing I like that I've seen more people doing ever, since the era of COVID, but one thing that we were playing with even before that is really just also the another engagement tactic, just keeping things changing and different, is just turning off the screen share, like we're doing right now, just talking. Or if you have 2 or 3 or 4 people, it's just the webcams talking, and then maybe you go back to the screen share at certain points. But just I could probably come up with a whole list of different ways to engage, and those are important ways too. The change in voice, or at unmuting a different voice from the audience, or just changing your screen share or playing a short video. And I've seen some newer features on some of the newer platforms too, where that's done really well, and like being able to just play a video question and things like that that we didn't have as easy a time doing in the last 8 years ago or so.
Right. No, you actually just, I know I just totally put you on the spot, and that's what I love about you, because you know your stuff, and you add some value. But just that moment of, let's just take the somebody listening right now. Put yourself in the shoes of an audience, right? You see PowerPoint is big. You see a couple little videos on the side or something like that, and somebody turns off screen sharing, and what happens to the audience member's screen? Something changes, right? That reticular activating system is triggered, even if they're not really paying attention out of the corner of their eye. Something big just happened. And so Erica just made a killer point. And Erica, more than once you've mentioned having another voice. Did you mind sharing how you and I used to do webinars when I was presenting and you were the MC? You
Yeah,
from your
yeah. So
perspective, how did that work?
I think what it did first of all was make it personable and make people feel like they were right there with us. Like we were just having a conversation. We moved quickly. We had a fast tempo, but we kind of had like a team. And one thing that I loved about if you're running webinars and you've got a speaker like Roger, makes your life easy because you do have to be on your toes, but it does make your life easy. When of course you're going to do a dry run, you're going to be prepared for all the things that you can prepare for, so that you've got a plan A, B, and C. But once you have that confidence and you can be comfortable to start early, to have a banter back and forth, to know that your speaker will say, "Hey, Erica, what are you seeing here?" Or bring you in, you're ready for that. You can flow back and forth just like you would if you were in person. Like, it doesn't have to be planned. It doesn't have to be scripted. If Roger sees a comment from someone typing something in on the questions behind the scenes, and wants to throw that out to me, then I'm there and I'm ready. And I just think that the tempo, the like, hey, come on in, like we're just having a party talking about webinars here, like that will make people stay and keep their attention as well.
Yeah. Well, and I
If
brought
that
that
makes
up
sense. But
because you were really freaking good at it. Because
oh,
I would throw stuff at you. You may not remember even how that started. Um, but for me, because I know I'm going to be barreling along as a speaker, my instructions typically to a moderator, and I believe it or not, some people still are deer in the headlights when you bring something like this up, would be like, hey, if you see something, just jump in. What? Right? That's just not part of the paradigm of some webinar MCs, moderators, producers. And I would just say, hey, just shout out Roger. I'm like, yeah, what? And then Erica jumps in. Let me tell you something else Erica was also really good at. Um, when I'm presenting, and we did lots of webinars to really large audiences, but when I'm presenting, I usually am just looking at as a presenter. I'm keeping an eye on the most recent thing that came in. And if a question came in, it doesn't take very long before that scrolls out of my view, because if you get 500 people on there and they each start typing stuff in, you end up with a really full questions box. So Erica would keep an eye on that stuff and go, hey, don't forget this question from Julie. And having the liberty, I mean, we just got second nature about it. And so that what she is saying right now, and particularly now that she's in another role, don't discount that, right? In fact, in some ways her experience is even deeper and broader than mine, because she's seen so many different speakers. Figure out how you develop some rapport with the other people that are on stage, even if their roles are different. This person's the speaker, this person's the speaker, this person's the MC, moderator, producer, whatever. Um,
yeah.
great point, Erica.
And
Hey,
and
if
I
you wanted to
mentioned
pull out,
confidence.
go ahead.
I mentioned confidence a few times too, and like that's not an accident. That's like preparing for the things, all the webinar things that can come your way. And when you do have executive speakers and you can't get their time, like you have to create that. And one thing I think you told me from the beginning, Roger, is like, or might have been another moderator that I learned from, but like it's I'm here to help you look good. You always say that. But like when you're running a webinar, even if you're behind the scenes, your ultimate goal is for that webinar to go well, among other things. You don't want it to crash. So you want to make sure your presenters are comfortable and confident, and part of your role is setting them up for that success as well. That's a whole nother topic.
It is a whole nother topic, but I've been really honored just to have a little piece of your time today. Thank you so much, and tell your organization, by the way, again, outreach.io.
Yes.
Care to take 2 seconds just to say what Outreach does?
Yeah, so Outreach is the only sales execution platform that can help you create and close your leads and help really kind of raise the level of your sales team from back in the old era. We had, the 80-20 rule where you got 20% of your reps performing. Well, we can't live that way anymore. That era is gone. We need to have all of the reps up leveled and productive, and Outreach really helps you do that. So it's a really exciting space to be in. It moves fast, and it's keeping me on my toes, Roger.
Yeah, software and what AI and machine learning and a whole bunch of things are doing these days is kind of crazy. In fact, we're gonna, speaking of which, besides giving a warm virtual thank you to our guest Erica Maki, I'll mention that one of these that we're going to do here in the next couple weeks is literally about the future of, and we're going to take some of these future leaning things like AI and that kind of thing and actually say, well, what is the implication going to be in the world of webinars? So stick around, and if you think about it, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Erica, any final thought, tip, exhortation, final words of wisdom?
I'm gonna stick with the word of wisdom that I heard in the 2022 predictions. The webinar is not dead, but boring webinars are dead. I altered it. Boring webinars are dead. You do have to be more creative, and you have to be adding value, or people aren't going to spend their time there.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate you spending a little time, and thank you to each and every one of you for honoring us with your attention. We do not take that lightly. And if you have any questions, by all means, feel free to reach out. And we will see you on the next edition of Virtual Venues Thought Leader Conversation Series. Thanks.
Thanks, Rod.